Sense of Soul.
Hey Soul Seekers, it's Shanna. Journey with me to discover how people around the world awaken to their true sense of soul. Now go grab your coffee, open your mind, heart, and soul.
It's time to awaken.
Today on Sense of Soul, I have Dr. Jenny Martin. She is a visionary spiritual teacher and consciousness researcher. She is reshaping our understanding of Western religion as rooted in the teachings of ancient alchemy. Her groundbreaking work stems from decades of research into non-ordinary states of consciousness, biophysics, ancient wisdom, specifically the first alchemist, known as Mary the Jewess. Dr. Jenny has a doctorate in counseling psychology and is a distinct voice in the psychedelic community. She teaches programs on the Psychedelic Cervix, which focuses on the shift in consciousness that sexual pleasure can produce for women and their partners. She is the host of Why Didn't I Know podcast, questioning assumptions and beliefs about women, sex, and God. Every once in a while, a guest becomes a friend, and Dr. Jenny is one of those. So it's my pleasure to welcome Jenny and share her amazing wisdom with all of you. Jenny, thank you so much for coming on Sense of Soul. I really appreciate you. I can't wait to talk about the divine feminine, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Oh, great. Well, I'm so happy to be here. I just really honor everything that you have done for women and for people and for spirituality and the world, and you're the real deal. I
Thank
appreciated
you.
our conversation before this.
Yes, I know. I
Really
feel so
did.
connected to you already.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Just to begin, can you tell us like how you came into this? I mean, I think we did speak and you mentioned that you grew up Catholic too, I think.
Yeah, I'm from Ireland, Dublin, Ireland,
Oh.
educated by the nuns, strict and all of that stuff. Yeah, and in terms of women in my family, all I saw was oppressed women.
Wow.
There was this idea that women needed to serve men, get
Mhm.
married, have babies, and it was
Yeah.
this idea that living a life as a martyr,
Hmm.
get your reward in heaven. Seriously.
Wow. You sound
And
like me. This is my story. Yeah.
yeah, and so my grandmothers died early in
Mhm.
their 50s of cancer,
Wow.
and the longest living grandparent I have, he died having sex with a younger woman in bed. He had a lot of sex and he smoked and he drank, and he lived like 40 years longer than anyone else. So go
Um,
figure. So I knew that there was a whole bunch of hypocrisy in that system, and I never could buy into it. It never felt real. It never felt right. Nature, being in Ireland and the richness of the beautiful when it rains and
oh.
the just the whole there was something about the land that really connected me. And then moving to British Columbia and spending a lot of time there, growing up as well, it had the same kind of vibe of that, earthy, beautiful forest and everything. And so that's where I drew my connection. And I had a chaotic childhood. I did not have an easy childhood. And both my parents, having grown up in that system, they had a lot of issues that they couldn't really take care of me. And so there wasn't that focus of love and nurturing and all of that thing that you're supposed to get, that as going through psychology, I learned about, called secure attachment. You're
Mhm.
supposed to be securely, you're a wonderful mom and you've connected beautifully with your kids, which I really honor. But not every mom is like
Yeah.
present to do that. And so I didn't have that. So my secure attachment came from the divine. And
Mhm.
because it was that or checking out, which I went through my periods of thinking about checking out as well. But it was either or. Either I have that strong connection or there's nothing else around. Because we left all of my family back in Ireland, and we moved without knowing any adults, knowing any people. And then my parents moved like every year of our life in different places. So there was never like a solid, okay, these are my neighbors, these are my people. So to get that grounding and that stability, I would find the divine in nature and I would talk to it. And I would see how the little bugs and the flowers, they all were taken care of. And if they could be taken care of, then I could be. And so
Mm.
that was my lifeline. Now, I went through a period where I sat in my room and listened to Metallica all day and wanted to commit suicide. So I had that
Mm.
balance. But still, from being young and having that grounding in nature, that connected me to. Anyway, full circle, when I met somebody who I really wasn't planning on settling down or having a relationship, I'm like, I can live on my own. I don't need to be one of these women that are oppressed like all of the women in my family. I don't
Right.
need it. I'm going to college. I'm doing my thing. The universe had other plans, and I met someone. I had to really reconcile finally with my sexuality. I'm like, okay, this thing, part of me is not operating correctly because all I knew was the negative, damaging, destructive view of it I got from the women in my family was that this part of your human expression is not for you, it's for the other person you're with. It's a duty to give this. And that just didn't feel right. And thankfully, I met someone who did not come from a background like that, who thought that that was craziness. And at that time, I found a book called The Woman with the Alabaster Jar by Margaret Starbird, a woman who lives in Washington State, who wrote it in 1994. And I found it in like 1995 when I was, starting my relationship. And what really got me about this woman's story was she was really conservative. And she hated that another book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail said that Jesus was sexual. She's like, I can't stand that. I got to do my Master of Divinity degree and show that there's no way he was definitely celibate. And everything she turned up in terms of all the different customs at that time and everything was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's the opposite. And so I got to know her. And at that time, I said to her, like, okay, this is a great historical story, but how do we bring this to today? And she goes,
Mm.
well, I don't know. Maybe that's your job. And she said that way back then. And I couldn't formulate that in my head. But then, you know what? I was working in the corporate world and my body was falling apart. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm not supposed to be here, but I don't have another plan.
Yeah.
And I'm earning good money and everything. And then the next thing I know, I get fucking fired. In fact, I had seen a psychic a year earlier because I was still trying to grapple with why every time I went to the doctor, they could not pinpoint what the problem was. But
Mm.
I was in a
Yeah.
terrible amount of pain. And she said, it's your job. You're not doing your calling. And if you don't leave, you're going to get fired. Which, in the scheme of things, I'm glad that happened rather than getting a terminal illness. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful. But the day I was living in a condo downtown Seattle, and the day that that happened, I went out to my dumpster. I was down in the dumps. I was like, oh, save
Literally.
me. I'm like, ah. And there was this ginormous picture of the Black Madonna, which I know from Margaret Starbird is Mary Magdalene,
Hmm.
by the dumpster that was framed. Beautiful piece of artwork. I had never seen anything like that before out there. And they were just like putting it by recycling.
Hmm.
I'm like, holy crap, the universe is not against me. I am supposed to go forward with my work. I started like, doing a version of what I'm doing now back then in person in the Seattle area.
Okay, so first of all, I have a Bridget. Let's see. You see,
What? Yes.
she was kind of like the introduction to the divine feminine for me. Because growing up Catholic, right, of course, there's Mary Magdalene, she was a whore, and Mother Mary was just like this grieving mother.
Yeah.
This is what I thought in my mind. But as a Catholic, I didn't believe in goddesses. That was fairy tales and all
Mhm.
that. But in Pistis Sophia, it's a Gnostic gospel. It was
Yeah.
found in the 1700s. But in that book, Mary Magdalene is throughout the entire book. It's basically Mary Magdalene and Jesus
Yeah.
having conversation.
Yeah.
And she is seeking and curious and asking, and he is responding. And there's like this teacher, student, parent, daughter. I mean, it's just like this relationship where I don't know about you, but as a mother, my kids have been my greatest teacher. As a
Mhm.
facilitator, I am learning more from my clients than
Yeah.
anything. So it was just a beautiful relationship and of one of equality. But as a Christian, it took a long time to break those
Yeah.
conditions of what a woman was
Oh, I know.
and what I've been told. I was like, your podcast name. Why didn't I know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we could go to all different directions on that. Some people might think that it was intentional.
Yeah.
And in another way, maybe it was covered up all this time because now was the time it needed to be revealed because society is a freaking mess right now. The world is in chaos, and what is missing, we're missing the feminine
Yeah.
presence and that knowledge that was locked out. And you know, Isaac Newton, the apple got dropped on his head and he came up with the law of gravity. He was an alchemist, right? And they didn't know that until like 1936 when they found like he had written over 1 million words on alchemy. Anyway,
Hmm.
he was very critical of the Catholic Church. And he believed that alchemy had happened before the flood, but then it had re-emerged in the first century. What he's basically saying is the Christian story was supposed to be alchemy. He says that all of that changed in the fourth century with the Council of Nicaea. They clamped it down, made Jesus Christ God, kind of erased the real story about Mary Magdalene, and put this very dictatorial, rule-based thing that wasn't about transforming yourself into an enlightened being, was about keeping you oppressed and so forth. And so Newton said, he predicted, based on his calculations on all of this, that the world would end in 2060 because of the robbing of alchemy from the people.
Wow.
2060, which is like not too far from here. He said, when you take that knowledge, you're suppressing all of humanity, and that suppression is going to eke out in different dark ways. And eventually that will overtake humanity. Like basically, he kind of said there's two choices in 26. Like, and it's not like that's written in stone, but coming up, he was writing in the 1700s. So he's like looking ahead. But there's two choices. Either we fall to this like oppression that has taken over, or we reclaim the original teachings, which is the original Egyptian religion, which is the original, you know, nature-oriented religion of all people. Either we reclaim that, which and reclaim our power as people and stop being oppressed, or this thing that's been, oppressing us over time that's gradually getting more steam will level out people. Like there's a
Yeah.
choice, and we are co-creators in which direction humanity goes. So, yeah, and he was too scared to release his 1 million words on alchemy when he was alive because you could have got killed by the Vatican at that time for that. He's the one that found out that white light has all the colors of the rainbow, and he
Mhm.
found that out by studying alchemy. Like he found out all of his scientific discoveries by the science that was available in early alchemy. And our chakras are the different light spectrums. And there has been university research done a couple decades ago showing that the different chakras are vibrating at different electromagnetic frequencies, right? And so the dyeing in alchemy was raising your frequency so all of these different colors in your body, all of these different energy centers all become one color. Like you dye, the chakras are actually merging to become one color, which is the white light as you raise your frequency. Like in the Gospel of Philip, it says God is a dyer. And it's like, what? God is a D-Y-E-R? What the heck is that? He's a dyer because dyeing is part of what alchemy was. It wasn't just working with metals,
Right.
but if we are not told that we are more than flesh and blood, and this is where I do kind of go on the conspiracy route, because the Central Intelligence Agency has documents that show that they know
Sure.
that we are non-material. And if we found this out, we would be able to cure diseases with our mind. We would be able to shift things with energy. We wouldn't be dependent on this corrupt system. We
Right.
would be an empowered being. But there is intelligence agencies that have the physics of our body and our
Mhm.
consciousness, that they have kept that under wraps because you can also use that to control people, their
Right.
mind. through vibration and different things. But then there's what is told in schools. And so when I wanted to study all of this, I'm like, okay, is this just ancient stuff or is there anything real about it now? And I
Right.
found out this guy, unfortunately, all these people are dying. But I found this guy a couple of years ago. He had the street cred to really bring this message. So he had his physicist degree from MIT and Princeton. And he said he did not know that the human body had this energy. And, like you're a Reiki master, right?
Hmm.
That's the energy we're talking about, right? And so you have these tradition, you have that school, but you can't go into a allopathic doctor and they won't necessarily believe that that's real energy. Well, what
Mm.
he said is there is hard science to show that, but he never learned
Yes.
it in MIT. He never learned it in Princeton. He went to Ivy League schools. They said it didn't exist. You know when he found out that
Um,
it exists? When he got a contract job at the CIA. When he got a contract job with the CIA, he was just astounded. Very not fringe people, but very well respected scientists that he knew. We're
mhm.
talking about remote viewing. We're talking about these different, and
Yeah.
that does not get explained by mainstream science. It only gets explained by this energy force. That is the energy force of Reiki, that is the energy force of consciousness, that's the energy force of alchemy and all of that. Well, he found out that the Russian government, the Germans, the
Hmm.
Chinese energy, this is a science of chi, but our government has spent, and the Russians have spent millions and millions and millions. And so he left his work at the intelligence agencies and he put together a few 700-page books to show that there is research that's been going on this that is verifiable, that this is not kooky stuff, like it's real. And it brings the esoteric world into the scientific world. That's
Mhm.
what alchemy is. It's a merging of the science and the mysticism. And
Yeah.
he did say in one of his books, he said that this stuff was taught in mystery schools before, but now we have this verifiable science. And so he wrote on his website, like a year before he died, he said, there's a change going to happen on the world, but we have to usher it in. And we have to know our power of consciousness and of mind in order to steward this new change. We can't just be passive and go, like, we have to know who we are to co-create this new world.
Right.
And so I was actually reaching out to him because I wanted to interview him and I couldn't hear back from him. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And then finally I got a hold of his sister and she goes, he passed. And so I talked to her and she was kind enough to keep his website going and to keep his books in publication. So she's keeping his message out there and stuff. But
Would you mind mentioning who he is?
oh, yes, please. Yeah, I'm so sorry I didn't. Claude Swanson. And his website is called Synchronized Universe. And the one book that really documents this life force energy is called Life Force. It's his second book. And he shows how this has been known. For instance, Wilhelm Reich is talking about the same energy. He came
Yeah.
to the United States and was curing cancer with this.
Yeah.
And our government put him in jail,
Right.
and his books were burned. Knowledge of this would totally transform how we treat disease, everything. But you
Yeah.
know what? It's not profit based in the same way. This is talking about not putting money first, it's putting consciousness first. And it's a radical shift.
Mhm. I love that, putting consciousness first. No, I'm in this world where I'm always talking to amazing people like you. And so, sometimes I look outside of the bubble, neighbors or whatever, and you know, it is like a woo-woo conversation, but it is not that woo-woo. And I always say, and I'm a part of new reality TV, and I always say, like, this is the new reality, that we have awakened to we're multidimensional. And also DNA, right? I mean, generations. I'm an ancestral genealogist. This is what I do. I've never experienced more healing than I have just bringing awareness to the stories that have gone untold. I think it's beautiful that you still hold, there's something you said, there's something about the land in Ireland that you were connected to. and how it
Yeah.
brought you peace and you learned to find mother there. We've been so programmed to think it's God, Father God,
Yeah.
that for me, reading the Pistis Sophia, learning of the Gnostic Gospels, I've been studying them for 5 years now, and having the understanding of why wouldn't there be a mother God? Like, how can you have a spiritual family? How can you have anything without a womb? It can't be father, son, and a ghost. There's got to be
Yeah.
a mother. And actually, now knowing and doing research, it is a mother.
It's really a crime what's happened with that. It
Yeah.
really is. As a teacher of sacred sexuality, I am aligning with that system in
Hmm.
a different way than I grew up with. I think I probably have lifetimes of coming from this European, whatever it is, the Eastern, even though I love traveling there and I have friends, from different parts of the world, it's not intuitive for me as much.
Mm.
Plus the fact that when I really dug into this deeper wisdom of the alchemy and Christianity, is an honoring of the feminine as the epicenter of it that I didn't see in some of the other Eastern traditions. There's more the life force is coming from the man, and if he depletes his life force, it's all about his life force.
Mm.
And so what I'm seeing in the alchemy here is when I was reading the papers from Isaac Newton that have been put online, his papers from the 1700 alchemy, I came across Mary the Prophetess. As I traced it out, there's lots of reasons to believe she was Mary Magdalene. So here
Okay.
is this scientist learning from this first scientist, because alchemy was originally a science, was learning from this first scientist, her name also being Mary Magdalene. That's why I don't see her as just a student of Jesus. I see her as possibly bringing this knowledge to him, right? And the Gospel of Mary Magdalene was found in Alchem, Egypt, where Zosimos, when that Library of Alexander burnt down and we almost lost
Yeah.
everything? The things that haven't been lost are records by this third century alchemist called Zosimos, who identified as a Christian and said his major teacher was this woman named Mary the Prophetess, Mary the Jewess, right?
Okay.
And so we don't have her books, but we have him quoting her all the time. And then Newton quoted her. And from both of these sources, from Newton and from Zosimos, one of the things that I got was that she had made a statement that we lost alchemy when the Greek philosophers, there was a time when it was thought that women didn't have a soul. That kind of inspired this terrible misogynistic Christianity, that version of it. Mary, the alchemist, says in her quoted writings, the philosophers lost the vessel of Hermes. And when they lost that, they basically lost what alchemy was. And so there's all of this procreative imagery in alchemy. Now, Carl Jung, I totally respect him, but he took that. He was one of the ones, by the way, who thought that Mary Magdalene was Mary the Jewess. Carl Jung was one of the ones that thought that.
Oh.
I totally respect him, but he went off in the direction that the feminine and masculine alchemy is all the inner work. And he went off in that direction. He took this raw data from Mary, like this information that he was looking at as well, and he filtered it through his consciousness and then formulated his whole model of alchemy that is the basis of a lot of psychotherapy today. But if you peel it back, why was it so secretive? Why was it so controversial? And Carl Jung has said himself, like, why the heck did they make it so secretive and everything? Like, it's just about your inner alchemy. Well, it wasn't. It was about friggin' sex.
Mm.
That's why it was so
Yeah.
secretive. It wasn't. If it was just about your inner masculine and feminine, you wouldn't have been hunted down and killed if you were doing it. Like, it was more than
Mhm.
that. It was sexual ritual. And one of the rituals was a sacred Eucharist that
Mhm.
Mary the Jewess and is the basis of Christianity. But Christianity inverted it. Christianity made it about, like, you've been to Catholic Church, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So you take the wafer, the bread, and the juice, and you're told that in Catholic, you're told that an alchemical thing goes on called transubstantiation, which
Mhm.
means that this piece of bread and this juice becomes the body and blood. That's friggin' alchemy, man. Like transubstantiation, I don't care what the priests say, they won't like the word alchemy, but they're alchemists when they're doing their little consecration magic over these bread and wine and saying now
It's a
it's become
ritual.
blood.
The
Symbolically,
blood.
you're agreeing on a spiritual level to eat flesh and blood. This God looks at you as a sinner and that you have to consume the flesh and blood of this tortured man who had to die to pay for something, like had to do a blood sacrifice, which is a very dark ritual. Isaac Newton criticized the way the Catholic Church did the Eucharist. He was horrified. Like he wrote in his writings how wrong it was. And this was one of the reasons why he knew the society was going to fail, because they distorted this technology and made people believe there was this blood sacrifice that like really set the course of the world on a really dark path. And there's a theologian who wrote in the 3rd century, all of the stuff is probably existing under the Vatican archives today. One of these theologians criticizing, the early Christians, and he talked about a Eucharist sacrament that happened, but it was sexual. This is what connects Mary Magdalene and Mary the Alchemist. They talk about the greater questions of Mary and this Eucharistic thing. And they're like, this sexual sacrament is 100% Mary Magdalene and Jesus. And then other people, like the book called The Jewish Alchemist, written by a scholar on alchemy. And he said, no, this is definitely the alchemist woman that is in this sacrament. So there's good reason to believe that Mary Magdalene was the alchemist and the Eucharist was sexual. And it was very hard for this church theologian to get it, because he's like, what? It's basically Mary having a vision, and that
Okay.
Jesus takes her up to the top of a mountain and they pray, which for me is the first, like when I look at Mary's alchemy, the first step in this sexual alchemy is to bring consciousness to the act. You're not just like, hey, let's hook up. You're bringing like there's a mindset to do with it. There's an understanding to do with it. And raising your frequency, getting into a higher state of consciousness. And then after they're on the mountain and after they pray, the next thing is Jesus takes this woman from his side. And if you look at this very literally left brain, this is why people think, oh, that's terrible. Well, the same thing is in the Gospel of Philip. Adam takes Eve from his side. Now, if this was a sexual act, that doesn't make sense, right? Because the man is supposed to go inside the woman. But in this, the woman is being taken out of the man. So it's not a intercourse symbolism. It's not that. What it is we have to understand, like the first sentence in the Gospel of Mary is, what is matter? She's getting us to look at the fact that we are not flesh and blood. We are energy. And you have to have like that mindset when you interpret this Eucharist, because why are they taking the woman out of the man? Because their biofields were merged, their energy fields were merged. They were that connected before they had sex. Now, today in sex, like porn sex or whatever, it's like, I could give a shit about you. You could give a shit about me. Let's hook up and let's fuck. Like, there's no connection. There's no consciousness. It's just seen as physical. But this is a very different thing. They go to a mountain, a higher state of consciousness. They pray. They're so connected energetically that they're already connected before they join their bodies. Then the next thing was he has intercourse with her. That's where the psychedelic aspect comes in, because when you're at that level of frequency and that level of connection, and then you're actually having sex, you are generating even stronger intentional field between the two of you. Like, and you're accessing an altered state, a really deep altered state. And the fluids in your body are carrying that frequency. And the next step is they exchange, like they're consuming each other's bodily fluids, which happens during sex, you know? Right. And like that's one thing that the theologian, he's like, oh my God, but this is part of the alchemy. Like it's actually part of the alchemy. And so they exchange the fluids, and this is actually exchanging energy between the body, because yin and yang, well, in terms of the actual physics of it, women carry left hand torsion, men carry right hand torsion. It's the spin of the electron. And when those different spins come together, that's how you create a new child. But it's also how you create consciousness. And then it says that, of course, they're interpreting through their warped mind. So they say, Mary was disgusted and she fell to the ground and Jesus lifted her up. Well, we have to kind of read through that and go, okay, what really happened? There was a raising up. This is the Kundalini rising. This was the
Mhm.
rising of the energy up the spine. So this sacrament, this Eucharist raised them up. Like it couldn't be more different than the male priest having the only right over the alchemy sacrament, that it being about honoring death and torture rather than love and pleasure, and that you are just having to like plead to this man out there rather than something transformational happening in you. Like it couldn't be more different.
Right. When going back to that choice, it was heresy. That's consciousness. To be able to make a choice is to be conscious and be aware.
Like, I am so against this whole new age thing of like, become egoless. Holy shit. Like, these women needed ego. And I say the same thing with the people in the psychedelics. Sometimes
Oh,
there's this like, we got to eliminate the ego. No, your ego is there, like, to give you dignity and self-respect. If you are in a group of people, and especially in a patriarchal society, when they're like, eliminate the ego, that's an easy way to then dominate another human. If you have no ego, then you have no backbone that says, screw that, I'm not going that way. Like,
wow.
we need our ego. I went to a wonderful energy healer in the local area, and I watched her work before she worked on me. And I said, what are you doing? She goes, I'm working on my own self-love and really, loving myself because I can't connect to my guides unless I really love myself. And I thought, wow, I love this woman. She's amazing. And that's the thing. If we're like down on ourselves, I got to get rid of this ego. This is bad. I've got to get over. This is exactly the same Catholic vibe of I'm a lowly sinner, I'm bad. Like it's the same vibe, it's just different words.
Right.
And I know what that produces. That produces people that are doormats, especially women. It does not produce someone who is more spiritually inclined. In fact, there's research to show that you will not connect with a higher power
Mhm.
if you don't feel like you are deserving of love yourself. You won't feel deserving of that. So I don't think you can go through any of this sacred sexual stuff that I'm talking about if you don't first have a healthy ego. Because if someone's coming at you, disrespecting you, you need to be able to stand up for yourself. Now, there's a difference between control and being an asshole and having healthy ego. This whole
Yep.
thing that if you are really spiritual, you'll push that away. It's that
Mhm.
this energy, you bring consciousness to it. And the Gospel of Philip says, trust and consciousness in the embrace. And it really makes it clear that it's not like every sexual act is going to bring this thing
Right.
to you.
Yeah.
It's when you bring trust and consciousness, when you're already fused at like a soul level with your partner. It's not like just going hooking up and having a lot of sacred sex, but it's when you have like a consciousness with your partner,
Mm.
when you trust. And I know, like, for a woman's body, our cervix is connected to our vagus nerve, our major mind body connection.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so this is why we can get into a deeper state of consciousness than men. Like, we are wired for a very deep state. And so when you allow your throat to open and allow big noise to come out as you're orgasming, same when you're birthing a baby, if you really allow that, it helps the contraction, it helps that. So the vagus nerve is the major mind body connector, and
Right.
that when people have, psychological issues, there's often something with the vagus nerve. And so it's going all over. And it's kind of like a caduceus because it's like wrapping
Mhm.
around the left and the right. Rutgers University, they do sex research. Like, a woman has so many different paths for this energy to move up. More than we are wired for these mystical experiences during
Yeah.
sex and childbirth. If we have the right setting, preparation for it, if we're not in
Yeah.
it. lights blaring and being checked every second. And, there has to
Right.
be a certain setting for it. But at Rutgers University, they had people that had their spinal cords severed and, they weren't supposed to be able to orgasm, right?
Okay.
And because nobody had
Oh,
ever thought that this vagus nerve has connection. And then these people were orgasming and they're like, what is
wow. This
causing?
is like an amputee, who can
Yeah.
still sense its body.
Yeah. And so
Wow.
they did all these scans on these people and they're like, they are doing it through their vagus nerve. And
Yeah.
so we can have clitoral, we can have vaginal, we can have
Right.
cervical. And really a cervical is all of that together. But there's different levels of like clitoral, pleasurable. But when you're really at that deep, well, that happens through penetration, cervical, you feel like you are not really here anymore. You feel
Right.
like you have taken a drug,
Ah,
most likely because of DMT. What is being talked about now as a neurotransmitter that actually regulates our regular perception. It actually has to do with our retinas and everything like that, as well as our pineal gland, as well as our third eye. But it's all part of our perceptual system. And so when we're at this higher frequency, when all of this energy rises up our body and our brain shifts into gamma brainwave state, when we're
mhm.
at a different brainwave state, that is triggering this release of this psychedelic within us. Now,
Wow.
we have the capacity to get into that first if we have a patient lover who's with us, who's taking their time, and there's foreplay and there's all of that. But then through intercourse, through the rhythmic, because you know how in cultures they'll have
Yeah.
dancing, rhythmic chanting, or when you have a rhythmic intercourse, the pineal gland regulates all of our rhythms. And it
Mhm.
really responds to rhythms, our
Yeah.
circadian rhythm, our menstrual rhythm, biological clock rhythm, all of that. And it really responds to rhythm. So if there is this effortless lovemaking rhythm of intercourse, this not only heightens your own altered state, but the man, through something called neural entrainment, they get to
Right.
grasp what you're grasping. Like their brain will mirror what your brain is.
Yeah. With
So
you.
they
Yeah.
get it by osmosis. So I ask you, like based on that science, who is the epicenter of all of this transcendence? It's and I love a lot of this stuff about the Sacred Mother, but not everyone chooses children. And this is
Yeah.
available to every woman. It's a
Yeah.
sexual God. This is why I like Mary Magdalene. Yes, I believe she had Sarah and she had a child and all that. If you go to France, they do the pilgrimage every year to her daughter. But Mary Magdalene really shows us what it's like to be a sexual woman, not necessarily your sexuality tied to maternity, your sexuality as being female. And
Yeah.
that this altered state is not just linked to procreation.
Right.
There's something really strange about us as women in
Mhm.
the that is again shows that our creatrix designed us for consciousness producing sex. Because if we were like the rest of the animal kingdom, when we went into menopause, we would die pretty quickly. Can't
Which
reproduce.
is why there's four goddesses now. We're not just moving into crone and done.
Yeah, yeah. But evolutionary biologists would say the purpose of reproduction, the purpose of sex is reproduction, and there's no use for you. And that's pretty
Mm,
true. In most of the animal kingdom, as soon as they
right.
stop being able to produce offspring, they're dead. Just a few species that even go into menopause, but then
Right. Right.
when they go into menopause, they die quickly. The female killer whale is one of the only exceptions to the rule where they last decades after they stop conceiving. So male humans can conceive right up until death. So you could definitely say from an evolutionary perspective,
Mm,
sex for them is about producing offspring. We're different.
yeah.
We have the sometimes more capacity for pleasure because it depends on self-confidence too. The more
Right.
confident you are, like you don't care, like your makeup's not perfect, like you don't care about some of the external stuff when you're older
Right.
and you have more confidence. So you have more capacity to enjoy yourself during sex and more capacity for pleasure after
Yeah.
menopause for a lot of women. And you have this full access to pleasure and this full access to the state of consciousness for decades and decades and decades after your evolutionary purpose is no longer there. So, what that tells us is the divine design of female sexuality was to elevate the consciousness of humanity, not to create babies. Creating babies is very important. We all need, more people. But if we were baby making machines as our primary thing, we would be dead pretty soon after menopause. Now, men don't have more of a, rudimentary function with their sexuality. They have looked, for instance, for the vagus nerve connection in men, like, okay, maybe it's the prostate, maybe it's not there. They're
What?
not getting into that deep state. Like it's not, they're getting into the deep state by having sex with
Right.
women. But if they don't have that, so you know how it says in stupid women's magazines, oh, women take longer to get, orgasm than men. It's because we're fundamentally designed to go to a far deeper place. And you can't just snap your fingers. You can't just be watching television and go into a transcendent state. There's preparation to move into your body. Men can just get a hard on and get ready and then ejaculate and they're there because
Yeah.
it's at a more superficial level if they just follow their regular body pattern. Our body is craving that transcendence and it wants to go deeper. That's why it's wired to, take longer. Then we
Yeah.
can have these multiple orgasms. We can do all of these things. Plus, the research shows that women can orgasm by thought alone, and that's not in the men's body. That the research doesn't show men orgasm by thought alone. We have this very
Right.
powerful mind-body connection.
This has been really like stripped from us, not to trust our intuition, not to trust our body.
They have sex ed finally in schools here in Washington,
Yeah.
and it's like there's three holes in a woman. You can put
Right.
this in there. Like it's so Neanderthal. They're like it is so
Yeah.
caveman the way they're
Yes.
approaching it. It is, I mean, personally, if I was going to school, I wouldn't even want to know that. Like
Yeah.
because it's treating you as an object. There's no consciousness about it at all. And so we have a long way to go in terms of reclaiming this stuff and bringing filter, like there are all these conversations happening at these levels, like what you're doing,
Yeah.
but has it filtered down? It hasn't.
Right. I feel that way all the time, Jenny. I mean, I think about everything I'm doing and everyone that's listening. I'm just like hoping that they see the need for a conscious future generation.
Yes.
And so when we are like coming together and having this sacred union of alchemy, what are the things that you see that change in your life? Like, how can that benefit someone?
So my life changed quite a bit. I didn't think I had anything to offer. And, I had my own sexual assault
Trauma.
experience. And what happens with that is because the vagus nerve is connected
Mm,
to the throat, so is that when somebody is assaulted in that way, it closes their ability to speak,
mm,
and there is an immediate response in the female body, even because the vagus nerve is 80% afferent. There's a two-way communication between the brain and the body. But
mm.
most of the connection is actually coming through the body is telling the brain before the brain can. Have you ever had a feeling in your gut before you could even figure out why you felt like
Right,
you're driving in traffic and you just feel, and then you're like, oh my God, that car almost hit me, but you felt it first.
right.
Well, in an unwanted sexual situation,
Mm,
your vagus nerve is designed to freeze you, put you into a nervous system shutdown. And
mhm.
even if you wanted to get up and run, even if you wanted to say,
You're
get the hell away
paralyzed.
from
Yeah.
you, you are paralyzed. It's like playing dead in the animal kingdom. It's a protective mechanism out there in the world. And so I had a really shut down system, and I didn't have a sense of even sex could be anything other than a traumatic or even a negative. But it was actually through having positive experiences through sex,
Hmm.
learning how to be back in my body, then learning how to receive, you know, I had that experience early on about this celestial love out there, but it wasn't like down in my body.
Right.
There was a disconnect. I could feel it lofty up there, but then I had a lot of like moroseness down here. Like there was this separation. But as soon as I started to feel this experience, this different experience of sex, it's like that merge. Like there was a feeling, not like I'm blissfully happy all the time, but I felt like that could come into me, like that celestial presence actually could reside in me. And I tell
Wow.
you, like, I never felt so much power in my body by having when I, first started having these experiences. I mean, I felt like I
Mhm.
could walk out the street and pick up a car. Like, but going from being completely
Yeah.
immobilized
You
and
feel like a
like
superhero.
there's nothing like sex to either crush a human or crush a woman, actually more
Mhm.
specifically, because she has this, men can more compartmentalize it, but it's not the same in the way we're
Mm.
wired. So there's the quickest way to crush a woman is by that. But the what we never hear of, hardly ever hear of, the way to reclaim, rehabilitate is a different experience of sex. There
Yeah.
is nothing. I mean, I enjoy the book by Naomi Wolf called Vagina, where she had her own epiphany that holy crap, your level of empowerment is directly related to how embodied you feel in your
Mm.
sexuality. There is a consciousness that is unique to women, that not that we're sexy and seductive, but that when you are connected with that life force energy, when you're not feeling like it's been taken from you, that it's somehow you're disembodied from it, when it's you feel present with it and connected with it, it does something to your own ability to feel sovereignty,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
feel in charge of your life. And that's what I started to see. And Mary Magdalene was instrumental in this, because I had this old identity, but I hadn't fully merged into this new identity. And I was having like, I had an intellectual understanding but not an embodied understanding, and I asked her to be present with me during that shift.
Wow. Yeah.
And, one time she like showed up in the moment with me. And that was like completely different. Like I had freedom, no internal dialogue, no
Wow.
second guessing, no doubting, no, none of that. And after that one experience, with her, with that merging, I felt like I had birthed a new identity, and then I could show up as this new person, because it takes a certain level of being able to turn your mind off and not having all that chatter at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. And after that experience with her, that turned off, which is a prerequisite for getting into the deeper experience. And, thankfully, having the right partner is a big part of it too. I mean, I've done ayahuasca,
Mm-hmm.
but this is better for me. Like, this is more profound for me.
So is it Christian's version of Tantra?
So I don't know. I haven't studied Tantra a lot, but from some of my students, they've come and they've told me about, seeing the divine in the other person and
Hmm.
doing these concentrated breathing practices and things like that.
Yeah.
There's not those types of practices in that kind of regimented way, because as soon as you're following a script like that, you feel like you're having to perform sometimes. One of the things that Mary's alchemy is recognizing that there is a force of nature that's beyond just you and me. So in Tantra, it's like, I'm the divine, you're the divine, it's us. But in this alchemy, it's yes, we are the embodiment of both an aspect of the divine, but there's a
Mhm.
third presence. And this is what we see in DMT experiences. People experience not just their own unconscious, but they experience a separate presence that they can dialogue with. And I know what that's like. The very first time I had one of these experiences, I felt like the room filled up with beings that I was having, like angels that I was talking with. So it's not just seeing the divine in the other person, it's like opening up to a new experience. A lot of times you hear in Tantra is, delaying the ejaculation and not losing the life force. See, this is not, when you look at the science, it's not, why would you lose the life force if you ejaculate into the woman? Does that mean that she has no life force to give you?
Right.
That
Yeah.
mean you're just losing it into an
Lose
empty,
your Jing. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
No, she's a powerful source of her own, a different aspect of this life force energy that you need, that your body can't produce. So there's an exchange that happens that elevates both of you. It's like 1 plus 1 is not 2, it's 1 plus 1 equals 5. But I think what they're getting at is it can't just be show up, have sex, and come right away. Like a woman's body needs lasting time. You need time. And the man needs to get into the consciousness too. It can't just be that. So I think that
Yeah.
what may have originally been intended to foster like a longer period of time became an obsession with semen retention. But then it became this idea that you're losing life force. Where do we get this idea that we're losing life force
Yeah.
if it's presupposing that she's not giving him anything? See how I feel like it's kind of misogynistic? And that's not what I see at all. In fact, she is generating this deep experience herself through the lovemaking. Her body
Yeah.
is generating this, and through the intercourse, he's taking this on as well. So it's a different mindset of what to expect. Plus, Jenny Wade wrote a book called Transcendent Sex, and she said in Tantra and Taoism, you're supposed to stop having sex after you reach a certain spiritual level. That's not what we're seeing here in this original Eucharist sacrament. And the same thing in the bridal chamber in the Gospel of Philip. It doesn't say this is a path to get to something else. If you interpret those words as sex, which I do, it's not like, okay, use this and then do away with it. No, it's like you need all of nature exists in relationship. This relationship is your path. It is not that you're supposed to become celibate. I mean, why are all these problems happening in the Catholic Church? Because when you forcefully try to ignore your humanity, it comes out in really bad ways.
And Jesus was Jewish and rabbis had wives. I
Exactly.
mean, look at the dove. And I was going to ask you because the dove does represent like the Eucharist. I'm a big visual person.
Oh, yeah,
But
that's
the
a
two
beautiful
doves, right? But I mean, this is often how it's shown. But so that the Grail, it's
one.
interesting.
It is. I think the dove is so profound because it reminds me of in the Gospel of Philip, how could the feminine impregnate the feminine?
Oh,
So the Holy
Holy Spirit.
Spirit is always symbolized as a dove.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
today in Christian churches, they say it's a man.
Mhm.
Well, originally the dove was female. And the Gospel of Philip is reinforcing that. It's saying that, first of all, that she was virgin. And secondly, that the Holy Spirit is male. No, the Holy Spirit is female.
The dove also is descending. Usually it's the messenger between heaven and earth, right? She is. You have the Kundalini, right? Or going up, but you have oftentimes, this, and I think that that's basically that's alchemy, right? Look at it as earth and heaven, and where are the in between? You know?
Yeah. There's this concept of Cleopatra was a student, and there is some
Okay.
belief that
Mm.
actually the Egyptian queen was some people disagree with this, but
Yeah.
Cleopatra was an alchemist, and it could quite possibly be the queen. But there is a connection between that and some of the teachings of early alchemy with Mary. And there's this image of a snake biting its tail. They interpret that as the Kundalini that is driven by love. There's a book that has only been in French for a long time. It really hasn't been translated to English that contains some of these early interpretations. Zosimos in the third century, when the
Okay.
Library of Alexandria didn't get burnt down, he records a lot of this stuff from Mary the Jewess and some of Cleopatra and stuff. But then there's another book by Jack Lindsay who contains some of this stuff as well. But yeah, this eating of the snake's tail, which is when you think about the ascending and descending dove,
Mhm.
one of the things I get couples to do when they're having intercourse is
Uh-huh.
to visualize this light
Mm.
between them as a circle, because it's not like you're
Ah,
making the light happen. The light is happening on its own. But the
right.
more that we bring conscious awareness to what is already happening, the more it facilitates it happening. The more we just
Right.
effortlessly allow our mind to see that. it's bringing heaven to earth. It is that ascending and descending energy that is, if you're having intercourse and you're joining your mouths at the same time, like you're kissing at the same time, you're actually feeling that light and seeing that light energy go from your mouth into their mouth, down their heart, down their body, down their genitals, up
Right.
through your genitals, up through your heart, down your mouth, and you can feel the energy building as you stay in that vibe. And what she really says, what Cleopatra and Mary really talked about, is the miracle working power in this whole thing is love.
So, how do you work with people? I know you have your podcast, so you're putting out info there so people can go to your podcast to learn more, but you mentioned your clients. How do you work with them?
Yeah, so I have courses I teach online. Just like with psychedelics, it's not the drug that necessarily produces the outcome, Timothy Leary said. It's the mindset and the belief system around it that
Mm.
really produces the effect. So what they call in psychedelics, it's the set and setting. And this is what we're doing in these courses that I have either for women or for couples, is to really get a new mindset. And I bring in the science, because
Mhm.
we really need to understand, okay, what is happening with the energy body when you're having sex? How are your thoughts, certain types of thoughts, fear-inducing sex? Like, it's not like there's a moralistic judgment about that, but that is
Right.
going to reduce your energy fields. And what is the altered state that is going to produce a long-lasting, beneficial, thriving state for your whole being? Because you can get into an altered state and then feel depleted. Like you can have a rush of euphoria, a rush of, your body can give off some kind of, pain medicine, really, like opioids, and you're like
Mhm.
high, and then you're just dead.
Oxytocin. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you're dead. Well, that
Mm.
is, sex can produce that. Certain type of sex can produce that kind of up and then crash. But then, is
Yeah.
there a way to have sex where we can have that transcendent state, but then we're not depleted? We actually feel more confident, more in charge, more clear, less brain fog, less unsure about ourselves, more, connected and loving to other people,
Mhm.
more connected to our spirit, and all of those things.
Yeah.
And there's a path of sitting in a, meditation retreat and disciplining the body and overcoming the body to elevate the spirit. That's one path. But then there's this feminine path of sensuality and pleasure,
Mm.
and, which can be done through self-pleasure. Like I do teach a course that is for women that is really focused on the self-pleasure aspect of this.
Nice.
And then there is a partner aspect of it, two different aspects.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's really important for women to get the personal aspect before they jump into the part.
Yeah. Because there's so much for women. There's so many levels. Bodies
Yeah. Oh,
dysmorphia, you got the generational patterns. Like there's a lot.
yeah. A lot of people only talk to their medical doctor about sexual issues. And their
Yeah.
medical doctor can be helpful, but not really to understand all the nuances
No.
of the mind body connection and the spirit connection. And, when there is something not functioning the way you want it in your body, a lot of times it is to do with your something emotional to work through,
Mhm.
and I used to work at a sex therapy clinic locally, and people would come in and they go, I don't have enough desire. I don't have enough
Mhm.
desire. What's wrong with me? Well, when you really ask them, what is your sex life like? The sex was so rushed and so not honoring a woman's body. I wouldn't desire that
Bam, bam. Thank you, ma'am.
either.
Right.
But then a woman has an epiphany. Oh, you mean like I'm not like broken? Like,
Right.
no, no, you just need to know what your body needs and know
Mm.
what your body wants. And it was a long time it was thought that sexual desire
Mhm.
was, uh, the way that men have sexual desire was the way that women have. Now
Mm.
it's realized that a lot of times women don't necessarily get all excited for sex right away, but once there is the giving and taking, the exchange and the intimacy, their body warms up to it and they want it. So it's a different
Yep.
model of how
Different kind.
arousal takes place.
Yeah.
And for a long time, university research just assumed that the way the male body was is just the way that there was a unisex
Um,
brain, and there
mm.
isn't a unisex brain when it comes to sex.
No.
The reason I focus on the cervix is that there is no baby without, the opening of the cervix for the baby to come out,
Right.
right? I mean, that is the
Yeah.
gateway between your baby staying in an altered state. And there's some reason to believe that
Mm,
they're having DMT in the womb. Like
yeah. I believe it.
the precursors of DMT have been found in the placenta. So there is this
Wow.
like tripping out state in your womb. And it was only when the cervix opens that
Yeah.
they come out. So it's the gateway
Wow.
between the worlds. If we, come through vaginal birth, we all enter the world through the cervix, through that portal. But then how do we become reborn? It's by interacting with that same gateway. Because it's shaped like a donut is really important in physics. And a donut can, if it's stimulated and you're excited, it can spin at very high velocity. The energetic part of your cervix, not just the flesh and blood, the energetic part of it can spin at a very, very high rate. And that can send cascades of energy up your whole body to your brain, shifting your consciousness. So I believe when the Bible is talking about born again, it was talking about go have sex with a woman
So
and be
interesting.
born again. Clearly, the disciples were not understanding a lot of what Jesus was saying because they question about the Eucharist. They go, "What are you talking about?" We see that in the Gospel of Mary. They're like, "We do not get this." And
Right.
Jesus said when he was talking about, I actually went back to the Bible the other day because I was looking at this again. In John
Mm-hmm.
3:3, he says, they're talking about this concept of born again, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like on this one track. And he's trying to talk about Kundalini rising, which can happen through this cervix orgasm. He says in John 3:13, and no one has ascended into heaven but he who has ascended from heaven, even the Son of Man. Okay, so Moses was an alchemist. Very next thing Jesus says when he's talking about himself ascending, he goes, and as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. He's talking about Kundalini rising. John 3:13 in the regular Bible. So what Isaac Newton is saying and what I'm saying here, like Isaac Newton did not believe that this knowledge was a side religion. He believed this was the main Christianity. The word Gnostic came up from one of these church theologians that criticized Christianity, trying to act like it was a separate thing. What Isaac
Yeah.
Newton said is garbage. This was not a separate thing. This was the central teachings of Christianity that they
Yeah.
distorted for their political purposes. His whole belief, Isaac Newton was saying, when the church became, wedded with the political leaders, which was
Mm.
really to use religion to control the masses, that's when the world was going to go downhill because it became a weapon of control against the people. And he believed that regular Christianity was all this stuff we're talking about, not a side Gnostic thing. Because a lot of the Gnostics believed the flesh was corrupt. They wouldn't have gone in for this whole thing. A lot of them thought the flesh was corrupt and this world was shit, like this world was fallen. Mary the Jewess was saying, no, our consciousness, we are the ones that can bring a heavenly presence on this planet.
I think that sometimes it's brought to us in a language that it's so foreign to us. I like the way that you deliver it. I think that it's receivable. I mean, it makes so much sense. You didn't sexualize women in any way or men. You know what I mean? I can see the divinity and the purpose and the need to have a conscious future in sex education.
So, one thing that's motivating me? So, I read a book about rape
Yeah.
by a woman who's an anthropologist. She died a couple years ago, but she had like 5 rapes on her college campus. And she's
Hmm.
like, holy crap, like what is going
Yeah.
on? Right. So she went and she did a study because there are books out there that say rape is evolutionary. Men are always going to, like, it's just going to happen. In fact, they bring it down to biochemistry and they go, there's like this thing and it's just always going to. And she's like, bullshit. I don't believe it. And her whole aim was if I can find one society that didn't rape women, then I can like blast that out of the water that it's
Yeah.
not part of our makeup. And she did. And what she found was that when there was a kind of a religious understanding, like a honoring of nature, and
Mm.
it's when people honored nature, they honored the woman's body. And when they honored the woman's body, it was like, I can't rape her. I can't like disrespect her sexually because then I'm disrespecting my food source and where I live and all of that. And
Yeah.
she went to live with some people in Indonesia for 13 years, which was the last society that was, she categorized as almost rape free. and they were called the Minangkabau people. These were not hunter and gatherers, though. You could get a university education there. This was an industrialized place, but they went with their matriarchal based system. It changed when the internet came in the 1990s. That's when rape started happening. But in the 13 years that she lived there, there was only 3 rapes. And 2 of the people that lived in that community, they had committed rape and they were so ashamed because there's shame if you go against the cultural norms in that group. And so they had defiled a woman. They suicided themselves because they felt so shameful for doing that. The third person that raped was a foreigner, and the people just got that guy out of town. Like they got him out of town, and like they were fine. And women grew up to know that their desire and their sexuality and was fine to dress
Great.
sexual and say that I love sex. And, it was like a normal part of life. And men just honored the women. But it wasn't like they were like demasculized men either. Like it worked. But it was all based on a framework of this is our connection to the world. This is honoring. This is sacred. It wasn't, there was definitely a spiritual rootedness to it. And
Yeah.
she says that when there's creation stories that the woman was the sinner or the woman was the downcast, this is what creates male domination. And this is so her whole thing, and this is what kind of drives me, is if we have a different story about what sex is and about what women are, and the way they're teaching sex in school today is that there's a couple body parts where you can stick together. Like it is a crime, like compared to knowing that we know now that if there's a spiritual foundation for this topic, we can eradicate sexual violence. Like, holy what crap? Like
Right.
most every woman you'll ask, like, are you worried about walking down a dark alley or being in an underground
Mm.
parking lot? They'll say, like, it's so normal today. We think, of course. Well, if you read Peggy Sanday's book, you're like, no, not every woman walked around like that all the time. Even in industrialized societies, it's not normal. It's
Right.
not normal. So I'm not driven by people having better orgasms. This is like, if we don't
Yeah.
repair this, like, there's a direct line between this and sex trafficking, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the self-harm and
Um,
all of that, because once you demolish what it is to be a woman, once you desecrate that image of that sacred woman,
that
it's a
self-love.
free reign to just, in the book 1984 by George Orwell, it said, we are not going to take your souls, we are going to make you willingly give your souls. Like, what kind of sadistic thing is it to actually make someone want to do that? Like, this is when society has lost all understanding of
Yeah.
the sacred and the sacred feminine. So
Right.
that's what drives me is these things are all connected. Like the problem we have today. And I was at a big, lots of people giving money today to sex trafficking organizations in Seattle. The whole convention hall was filled.
Well, I just said I wanted to do something like that or give money, give time. I feel that right now.
Yeah, there's an attention of it, and they're finally come to the idea that okay, we need to have rights based, like I have a
Yeah.
right, sovereignty, and I think that's a great step. But knowing that it all connects to having a sacred spiritual understanding,
Yeah.
because you're having these high level, wonderful, beautiful, life giving conversations, we need to have this stuff filtered down to the
Yeah.
world,
Yep.
because like this stuff is powerful and life
Yeah.
changing, but there's conversations happening out there and there's people, that are being
Yeah.
affected that somehow aren't getting the information,
Right.
so I mean,
Ugh.
thank you for the work you do. I really enjoy talking to you.
I know. You too. I could listen. I'm serious. This could be like a 5 hour interview because I literally I'm learned so much and I have so much more to say even. And I've held back because I knew if
Oh,
I kept
please,
going, then I would like we'd be here forever. But I mean,
oh,
that's just how
but I
much I could talk to you. So we'll just have to have another conversation. We'll have to have another interview in the future and continue to have those trickle down as much as we can. And it's really funny as I get older, some of my conversations are as pleasurable So I thought it was very interesting how you say women can just think and have an orgasm because, some really deep conversations excite me so much. It is a
Yeah.
euphoric feeling, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you're raising that energy. It's about energy and how your body is reacting. And I just love that you really brought that to me today. Thank you.
Well, thank
Uh,
you. And you
um,
too, right back at you. I appreciate, I mean, we went deep right from the beginning because there's
yeah,
meaningful stuff. There's
right.
meaningful stuff out there. And I really feel like it was divinely led for us to connect.
Yeah, big time. I really needed our conversation before too. So thank you so much. Tell everybody where they can find you. Plug yourself.
Yeah, so my website is drjnnymartin.com. Maybe you would be able to link it. I don't know. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
my free webinars on my site. And I'm on X. I've been there for a long time. And Substack, I do Substack. And
Mm,
yes, I'll be restarting my podcast soon again as well. And I
awesome.
do, you know, webinars from time to time and then teach the classes as well.
That's awesome. Really appreciate it. I think what you're doing is very important, Dr. Janie. Thank you.